The wind carried a sharp bite that evening across the wide open plains, the kind of chill that made even the strongest horse draw its head low against the gusts. The prairie stretched endlessly under a pale sky, painted with fading streaks of crimson as the sun began to sink behind the distant ridges. Somewhere in the hush of twilight, a rider moved silently, his figure strong, upright, and watchful. He was an Apache warrior, broad-shouldered and lean, with long dark hair that trailed down his back like a river of night. His eyes searched the horizon with caution, for he had lived long enough to know the land never truly rested. There were always signs to read, whispers to follow, dangers to anticipate. The people called him a guardian of his tribe, a man forged by storms and battles. His hands carried the memory of bowstrings and the weight of tomahawks, yet his heart often carried something heavier, though he seldom showed it. Silence was his companion, patience his shield. That evening, however, he felt the strange pull of something he could not name, as though the earth itself was stirring with secrets it had waited years to reveal. The air smelled of smoke and pine carried down from the mountain slopes. Somewhere nearby, a fire burned, not wild but tended. He slowed his horse, narrowing his eyes at the thin ribbon of smoke rising in the dim light. His instincts warned him to be careful, yet curiosity drew him closer. He had seen many strangers pass through the land, soldiers, trappers, wanderers, and each encounter carried its own weight. But something about the stillness in the air, the way the flames flickered against the dusk, told him this was not an ordinary meeting. He dismounted quietly and walked forward, every step steady and measured. The fire crackled ahead, and beside it sat a figure wrapped in a shawl of soft brown wool. The maiden lifted her head as if she had been expecting him. Her eyes, wide and bright, seemed to hold both warmth and sorrow, like a story waiting to be told. The warrior studied her with suspicion, though he could not deny the unshakable pull of her presence. "Don't you recognize me, Apache warrior?" Her voice broke the silence, soft yet certain, carrying the weight of memory. She rose to her feet slowly, the firelight brushing against her face, revealing delicate features touched with determination. She took a small step closer, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm the girl from the blizzard," she said, her words hanging heavy in the night air. The warrior's heart gave a quick, unfamiliar jolt. A memory stirred, faint and distant, from a night when snow fell like knives from the sky. He remembered the bitter cold, the storm that swallowed everything, the shadow of a figure barely clinging to life against the endless white. He remembered the way his own body had burned from the frost, and how his strength had almost failed him. Yet there had been someone there, someone fragile, yet fierce, whose presence had left a mark he thought he had forgotten. Could it be this woman? Or was she weaving tales meant to trap his thoughts? Her gaze never faltered, as though she was willing him to remember. "You carried me through the storm," she whispered, her words trembling, but unbroken. "Your arms shielded me when the wind would have taken my life. I saw the snow freeze in your hair, saw the blood on your hands, yet you never let me go. It had nigh, but you would not allow it." He said nothing, his jaw set firm, but his eyes betrayed the flicker of recognition. 1,000 questions burned within him. Who was she beyond this memory? What path had carried her back into his life now, in this place, under this sky? The land was wide, and time was long, yet here she stood, speaking of things he had buried deep. The maiden's breath came shallow, her hand tightening around the edge of her shawl. "I searched for you," she confessed, her voice hushed as though she feared the night itself might steal it away. "Years have passed, and still I carried the memory of your strength, your silence, the way you gave without asking for anything in return. I told myself I would find you again, though I had no name, no trail, only the face etched in my heart. And now, here you are." The warrior's hand tightened around the reins he still held, his mind swirled with conflict. He had been raised to trust action over words, to question every step that fate placed before him. Yet the look in her eyes cut through his doubts. There was no deception there, only the raw truth of someone who had carried the same storm within her soul. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks into the air, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. The prairie, the wind, the silence had all bent toward this fragile thread of memory and destiny binding them together. He finally spoke, his voice low and steady, though laced with caution. "If what you say is true, then the storm took more than frost and breath. It took time, and time changes people. It's a girl I carried, ... She belonged to the snow, to the night. You stand here now, but are you still her? Her eyes glistened as though tears threatened to fall, but her voice carried strength. I am her, and more. The storm shaped me, but it did not end me. And you, Apache warrior, you gave me life when the land would have claimed it. You may not know me now, but I have known you every day since. The wind whistled through the grass, tugging at their clothes, carrying with it the restless cry of something unseen. He felt the weight of choice pressing on him. To turn away meant burying the memory forever. To accept her words meant opening a door to a past he had kept locked. Before he could answer, a distant sound broke the stillness, a sharp echo rolling over the plains. The crack of hooves against dry earth. The maiden turned quickly, her face shifting from tenderness to alarm. The warrior's hand went to the knife at his side, his instincts sharpening. Someone was coming fast and unrelenting. Her eyes snapped back to his, fear flashing through them. They must not find me here, she whispered urgently, stepping closer to him. If they do, everything will be lost. The warrior's muscles tightened, his senses alive with tension. He had no time to weigh truth or lies. The moment demanded action, demanded choice. His eyes narrowed on her face, the firelight dancing across her determined expression. He knew only this: whatever storm she carried, it had not passed. It had only just begun. And as the thunder of hooves drew nearer, the unanswered question burned between them, fierce and unyielding. Who was this maiden truly, and what force had driven her back into his path after all these years? The night offered no answers, only the rising edge of danger and the promise that nothing in his life would remain the same. The sound of the hooves grew louder, beating against the earth like drums of warning. The Apache warrior's eyes narrowed as he listened closely, every sense alive with the danger pressing in. He stood tall beside the fire, his shadow flickering across the flames. The maiden gripped her shawl tighter, her face pale under the dim sky, yet her eyes glowed with a desperate fire. She looked as though she had been running for days, her steps guided by both fear and hope. The warrior motioned for her to stay close. His hand brushed the hilt of his blade, though he kept silent, his ears trained on the direction of the sound. Whoever was coming rode with haste, and haste seldom brought peace. The maiden lowered her gaze, as though the weight of unseen enemies bore down on her shoulders. "You must trust me," she whispered. "They follow my trail. They find me, they will not stop until I am silenced." Her words stirred something inside him. Trust was not given lightly, not in a land that tested men and women with every sunrise. Yet there was something in her voice, in the tremor beneath her steady tone, that spoke of truths she could not yet reveal. He could see it: she carried secrets, and those secrets had drawn danger to her, like wolves to a wounded deer. The warrior studied her face, searching for falsehood, but the fear she bore was real. He gave a single nod, silent but firm, and motioned toward the shadows away from the fire. She followed without question, her steps light but hurried. The two of them slipped into the tall grass, the flame behind them shrinking until it was only a faint glow against the night. They crouched low as the riders drew near. The warrior's heart beat steadily, his body still as stone, his breathing controlled. The maiden's breath came shallow, her hand trembling as she clutched the edge of her shawl. She leaned closer, whispering so softly he almost did not hear. "They believe I carry something that belongs to them, but it is not theirs. It never was. That is why they hunt me." The warrior said nothing, his gaze fixed on the figures that now appeared through the dusk. Dark shapes on horseback, their outlines sharp against the pale light of the moon. There were 3 of them, riding hard, their heads turning as though searching for a sign, their voices carrying low curses into the wind. The warrior felt the maiden shift beside him, and he placed a steadying hand on her arm, reminding her of silence. They watched as the riders circled near the fire, their horses restless and snorting against the smell of smoke. One of the men leaned low, scanning the ground, pointing toward the footprints that led away. The warrior's chest tightened. They would follow. The land told stories, and these men knew how to read them. It was only a matter of time before they found the trail. He turned his head, meeting the maiden's anxious gaze. There was no more hiding, not for long. When the riders moved on, their hooves fading into the distance, the warrior rose to his feet and pulled her gently with him. "We must move," he said at last, his voice quiet but resolute. The plains offer no cover for long. They walked swiftly under the cloak of night, the grass swaying around them, the stars bright and cold above. The maiden clung to her shawl, her face set with determination despite her fear. The warrior led the way, his steps sure, his senses alert for every shift in the wind, every rustle in the darkness. After some time, she finally spoke again. "You still do not remember fully, do you?" Her voice was soft, yet there was a sadness woven into her words. He glanced at her briefly, his face unreadable. "The storm was long ago. I remember the snow, the weight of another life in my arms. I remember fighting against the night so death would not claim us both. But the rest is clouded." Her eyes shone faintly in the starlight. "That night changed everything for me. I was a girl then, fragile and lost. You were strength when I had none. I held on to that memory, though I had nothing else. I told myself if I could survive, I would one day find you again. And I have." The warrior said nothing, though the words settled deep inside him. A strange heaviness filled his chest, one that was not unwelcome, but unfamiliar. He could not deny that her presence stirred something old, a spark hidden under years of ash. They reached the edge of a grove where cottonwoods whispered in the night breeze. Here the warrior paused, kneeling to examine the ground, touched the earth with his fingertips, feeling the faint tremor left behind by hooves. "They are skilled trackers," he murmured. "They will not stop." The maiden's face tightened with worry. "And I have brought danger to you as well. Perhaps I should have never sought you out." He turned his gaze on her, steady and unyielding. "The storm joined our paths once. Now it has done so again. Fate does not cross trails without reason." Her lips parted as though she wished to speak more, but she held back the weight of her secret pressing hard against her silence. She only lowered her head, her shawl slipping slightly from her shoulders. The warrior studied her in the quiet, sensing there was more than fear in her heart. There was something she carried, something beyond memory or longing. Whatever it was, it had drawn men to chase her across the plains, and it had returned her to him. He rose again, his figure tall against the dark. "We must keep moving until dawn, then we will decide the path." They traveled deeper into the grove, the trees thickening, their branches weaving shadows across the moonlit ground. The maiden walked close beside him, her silence heavy, her steps faltering with weariness. Yet she did not complain, did not ask to stop. Last, as the night deepened, he spoke again, his tone firm but edged with curiosity. "Tell me what it is you carry that men would risk the chase for. Tell me why they hunt you." Her breath caught, and she glanced at him with wide eyes. "If I tell you, will you believe me? Or will you think me foolish for holding on to something the world has long forgotten?" His gaze remained steady. "The truth is not foolish, even when it is heavy." She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her shawl. "It is not gold, nor land, nor anything they can trade. It is a promise, one that was made long before I was born. A promise that rests in my hands now, though I never asked for it. They believe if they break me, they can claim it. But the promise does not belong to them." The warrior felt the weight of her words, but did not press further. The fire in her eyes told him she spoke truth, though the meaning still lay hidden in shadow. He only nodded once, silently acknowledging the burden she carried. The night passed slowly, the cries of owls echoing through the trees, the sound of water trickling somewhere nearby. The maiden's steps grew heavy, yet she pushed onward. The warrior guided her with calm strength, his watchful eyes never leaving the dark edges of the land. When dawn began to paint the horizon with pale light, he stopped near the bend of a stream. The water shimmered softly, and the air carried the cool breath of morning. Here he allowed her to rest, his own body poised in quiet vigilance. The maiden sat by the water, her hands trembling slightly as she cupped the stream and drank. She lifted her face, the light of dawn brushing her features, softening the fear that lingered there. For a brief moment she almost seemed at peace, but the warrior knew peace was fragile. The sound of distant riders still haunted his ears, the memory of their hunt etched in the earth behind them. The questions still burned between them, unanswered, their weight heavier than the miles they had walked. As the sun crept higher, the maiden turned her gaze toward him, her expression grave. "There is more you must know," she said, her voice steady though her hands shook. "But if I speak it, there will be no turning back. Once you hear it, your life will no longer be your own." The warrior met her eyes, his face unreadable, but his spirit unflinching. He had walked through storms, through fire and blood, and now through the shadow of fate itself. Whatever truth she carried, he was ready to hear. The wind stirred the grass, carrying the distant echo of hooves once more, nearer now, relentless. The choice lay before him, and the dawn offered no mercy. The secret she held was about to unravel, and with it, the world around them would shift in ways neither could yet imagine. The stream whispered quietly in the early light, but its calm could not hide the unease that filled the grove. The Apache warrior crouched near the water's edge, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon, though he did not look at her directly. The maiden sat close by, her shawl wrapped tight against the morning chill, her thoughts heavy. She had carried her secret for so long that the words ached to escape, yet the weight of them made her tongue falter. The sound of hooves from the night before still lingered in his ears. He knew those men were not wanderers. They rode with purpose, their pace too urgent to be anything but pursuit. He could not yet say why they hunted her, but the truth was clear enough. Danger followed her every step. The maiden broke the silence at last. "These men that chase me, they believe I hold a map. Not a map of rivers or mountains, but a path to something hidden. They call it treasure, though it is not gold. It is something older, something that belongs to the people of this land. My father kept it safe until his death, and before he passed, he placed it in my hands. I never wanted it, but it is mine now, and they will not stop until they have it." The warrior listened, his face carved in stillness. A map, a promise, an inheritance of sorts. It explained much, yet raised more questions. He asked simply, "Why bring it here? Why seek me?" She turned her eyes toward him, searching his face. "Because I remembered you. You carried me through death's storm once. I told myself if ever I was lost again, I would find you. And though I had no name, no place, I believed the land would guide me back. It did." His heart gave a quiet stir, but his expression remained guarded. The land does not guide without reason. If this burden is yours, it will not vanish by passing it to another. "I know," she admitted, lowering her voice. "But I also know I cannot survive it alone." The warrior rose, the morning sun painting his figure in bronze light. He had walked many paths, some filled with war, others with silence, yet never had he felt the hand of fate press so firmly against his back. Her secret was no longer hers alone. By standing beside her, he had taken it into his keeping. Their rest was brief. He urged her onward, and they moved through the thinning trees into open land once more. The prairie stretched wide and golden under the morning sun, but the openness brought risk. Tracks would be clear here, and the hunters behind them would not falter. As they traveled, the maiden spoke little, though her eyes were alive with thought. From time to time she glanced at the warrior, as though measuring whether he would turn away from her burden or stand with her against it. He gave no such answer, only his steady presence beside her, silent but unyielding. By midday they found shelter among jagged rocks that rose from the earth like broken teeth. Here the warrior paused, scanning the horizon before leading her into the shadows. They sat in the cool shade, the maiden clutching her shawl as the wind swept through the high grass beyond. She finally spoke again. "You do not ask what the map leads to? You do not ask what they want?" His gaze flicked toward her, steady as stone. "If it is for greed, it does not matter. If it is for power, it is poison. And if it is for truth, it will reveal itself in time." Her lips curved faintly, though sorrow lingered in her eyes. "No. Then you know already. What it leads to is not riches, but something greater.
Nice.
It speaks of land, of water, of a place that holds life. A place others would claim for themselves, though it is not theirs. That is why they chase me." The warrior felt the weight of her words. He had seen land taken, rivers seized, people driven from what was theirs. If her secret pointed to such a place, then her burden was heavier than even she understood. While they sat in silence, a hawk circled high above, its cry piercing the still air. The warrior lifted his head, watching it with careful eyes. He knew signs when he saw them. The hawk circled not for prey, but for movement below. Someone was near. He rose quickly, scanning the edges of the rocks. His ears caught it, then the faint rhythm of hooves, once more, closer now. The men were not far. The maiden tensed, fear rising in her chest. "They have found us," she whispered. "Not yet," he replied firmly, his voice calm but edged with urgency. But soon, they moved again, deeper into the rocks, weaving through narrow passages, until they found a hidden trail that led downward toward a dry creek bed. The warrior moved with skill, erasing signs of their passage, as best he could.
Out.
Yet he knew hunters trained in pursuit would still follow. As they walked the creek bed, the maiden's voice broke the silence. "There is something else you must know. I am not the only one who guards this secret. Others know, though scattered. Some believe in keeping it hidden, others in sharing it. My father was among the first. But with his death, those who seek to claim it have grown bold. I fear there is a traitor among those who once stood with us." The warrior did not falter in his step, but his jaw tightened. The betrayal was a wound deeper than any blade, and it explained the swiftness of her pursuers. Someone had opened the way for them. The maiden pressed on. "I do not know who, but they are near. Perhaps closer than either of us think." The words settled heavy in the warrior's mind. Trust was a fragile thing, and betrayal was a shadow that could hide in any face. He knew then that their conflict was not only with those who rode behind, but also with unseen hands that moved in silence. By evening, they reached a stand of trees near the edge of a low valley. Here they made camp, the fire small and hidden beneath the cover of branches. The maiden sat close to the warmth, her face weary but her eyes still holding that quiet determination. The warrior sat nearby, sharpening his blade, though his mind was far from the steel in his hands. As the firelight flickered, she spoke once more, her voice low but steady. "Do you regret it, that you have walked beside me now, when you could have turned away?" He lifted his eyes, meeting hers across the flames. "The land does not weave chance. What comes is meant. Whether it brings battle or peace, it is not regret I carry, but readiness." Her gaze softened, though her hands trembled slightly as she held them to the fire. "Then perhaps I was right to believe the storm would bring me back to you?" The night grew darker, filled with the distant howl of wolves. The warrior listened, his thoughts heavy with the burdens of tomorrow. The maiden's secret was now entwined with his path, and the men who hunted her were only one piece of a larger storm. The promise she carried was not simply hers, but tied to land, to blood, to all that had been fought for and lost. As the flames burned low, a shadow flickered at the edge of the trees. The warrior's hand tightened on his blade, his eyes narrowing. For a heartbeat he thought it was only the shifting light. But then the sound came, soft steps, careful, deliberate. Someone was out there, watching. The maiden's breath caught as she followed his gaze. "Is it them?" she whispered. His jaw set firm. Perhaps, or perhaps another. The fire hissed softly, the air thick with silence. Whoever lingered beyond the shadows had not revealed themselves, and that made them all the more dangerous. The night stretched on, the fire dimming, and with it the fragile line between safety and peril. Neither spoke again, but both knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The hunters drew closer, the promise weighed heavier. The shadow of betrayal hung over them like a storm yet to break. The fire's glow had nearly vanished, leaving the grove wrapped in heavy shadow. The Apache warrior's hand rested firm on his blade, his ears sharp to the faint stirrings in the night. The maiden sat close to him, her shawl drawn tight, her breath shallow with fear. Neither spoke, for words felt dangerous when unseen eyes might be listening. The sound in the dark had been deliberate, not the careless rustle of a deer or fox. Whoever lingered out there knew how to move with silence, and that alone made them dangerous. The warrior rose slowly, his steps noiseless against the earth. He motioned for her to stay still, his gaze fixed on the tree line. The maiden clutched her shawl, her knuckles pale, watching as he disappeared into the shadows. The silence pressed tighter with each passing heartbeat. She strained to listen, but the night offered no comfort. Only the whisper of leaves and the distant cry of an owl reached her ears. Moments passed before he returned, his face set in grim lines. "We are not alone," he said quietly. "But they watch, not strike. For now, why wait? To see where we go, to learn what we do. A hunter does not always kill at once. Sometimes he waits for the prey to lead him to more. Her stomach tightened at his words. It was not only her life at risk now, but his as well. Whoever followed them wanted something far greater than her capture alone. The thought of betrayers among those who once guarded her secret gnawed at her heart. Could it be that one of her own had traded loyalty for greed? The idea burned, yet she could not shake it. The warrior's gaze lingered on her face, as though he sensed her turmoil. He said nothing more, only pressed out the fire's last embers beneath his boot. We moved before dawn, and so they did. The prairie lay vast before them once more, touched faintly by the gray light of morning. The wind carried the smell of dust and grass, and the horizon stretched unbroken, yet even here, under the open sky, the weight of pursuit hung over them. The warrior kept his eyes sharp on the distance, scanning for the faintest movement. The maiden walked close at his side, her steps heavy but unyielding. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, the air thick with heat. At last, they reached a rise where the land dipped into a narrow valley. The warrior paused there, his figure tall against the sky, his eyes searching the far ridges. He saw it then, a glint of movement, faint but undeniable. Riders, still distant, yet closing the gap. "They come," he said firmly, his hand tightening on the reins of his horse. The maiden's breath caught, though she had expected it. "How long until they reach us?" "Not long enough. We cannot outrun them on open land. We must lead them where the land gives us advantage." They descended into the valley. The air cooler in the shadows of the cliffs that rose on either side. The ground here was uneven, scattered with brush and stone. The warrior moved with purpose, his mind already shaping the land into a weapon. Every ridge, every shadow, every narrow bend was a chance to turn the hunter's strength against them. As they pressed deeper, the maiden finally asked the question that weighed on her heart. "What will happen when they reach us?" He did not look at her, his gaze fixed ahead. "Then the truth will show itself. Whether they hunt for power or for blood, we will see it in their eyes." She swallowed hard, the fear curling tighter in her chest. Yet even in her fear, she felt a strange strength at his side. His calm steadiness gave her hope, though the storm around them grew louder with every passing hour. By nightfall, they had made camp again, this time beneath the shadow of a rocky ledge that shielded their fire from view. The maiden sat close to the flame, her shawl slipping as she stretched her hands toward the warmth. Her eyes lingered on the warrior, who sat sharpening his blade once more, his expression calm but watchful. "I have carried this burden alone for so long," she said softly. "But now that you are here, it feels both lighter and heavier. Lighter because I am not alone, heavier because I fear what it may cost you." He lifted his eyes, meeting hers with quiet intensity. "The land does not measure cost as men do. What is meant will come. But know, this you are not the first to be hunted, nor will you be the last. What matters is what you carry inside. That they cannot take unless you give it." Her throat tightened at his words, and she looked away, her heart caught between fear and gratitude. She wanted to tell him more about her father, about the others who once guarded the secret, but the night felt too fragile to hold so many truths. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of fire and the distant cry of coyotes. Then came another sound, faint but sharp, the snap of a branch in the dark. Both of them froze. The warrior's hand moved to his knife, his body tense as stone. The maiden clutched her shawl tighter, her breath held. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in dust and silence. For a moment the maiden's heart stopped, fearing it was one of the hunters. But as the figure stepped into the fire's glow, recognition lit her eyes. "It cannot be," she breathed. "I know you." The warrior's grip tightened, his gaze hard and untrusting. The stranger's face was lean, weathered by the sun, his eyes sharp but shadowed by guilt. He raised his hand slowly, showing he carried no weapon drawn. "You should not be here," the maiden whispered, her voice trembling between relief and betrayal. The warrior's voice cut through the air, low and steady. "Who is he?" She hesitated, her lips parting but no words coming. The silence spoke louder than any truth she could have given. "Out." The warrior's eyes narrowed. The stranger stepped closer, his voice rough with urgency. "They are coming faster than you think. Must leave this place before dawn." "Why warn us?" the warrior asked sharply. "If you are not one of them, prove it." The stranger's jaw tightened, his eyes shifting toward the maiden. "'Cause I once swore the same oath her father did. I once believed as he did. But I faltered, and now the hunters know more than they should. I came to make it right if there is still time." The maiden's chest ached with a rush of grief and anger. This was the betrayal she had feared, standing now in flesh and blood before her. She wanted to scream, to ask why, but the warrior's firm presence kept her grounded. The warrior's eyes stayed cold, though his voice held no tremor. "If you betrayed once, you can betray again. Words are not enough." The stranger bowed his head, shame heavy in his stance. "Then let my warning be enough. They will not wait for another night. They come with numbers, and they come ready for blood." The warrior studied him for a long moment, then turned his gaze back to the maiden. Her face was pale, her eyes clouded with hurt. He saw the storm tearing through her heart, but he also saw the fire that still burned there. At last he rose to his feet, his figure tall and unshaken. "Then we meet them," he said simply. The maiden looked at him, her breath catching. "But how? There are too many." He placed a hand on the hilt of his blade, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the fire. "The land will guide us. The storm once carried us through death. It may do so again." The maiden's heart pounded as the weight of what lay ahead pressed down upon her. The hunters drew closer. The betrayer stood before them, and the truth of the map still burned unspoken between them. Every path led to danger, every step into the unknown. As the night deepened, the fire burned low, and the sound of hooves began again, faint but steady, echoing across the land. The maiden clutched her shawl, her eyes wide with fear and defiance. The warrior stood at her side, silent but unyielding, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the storm of fate gathered. The moment of reckoning was no longer far, was riding toward them with every heartbeat, and the land itself seemed to hold its breath for what was about to come. The air trembled with the thunder of hooves before the riders even came into view. The Apache warrior stood at the edge of the firelight, his shoulders broad and unshaken, his blade glinting faintly in the glow. The maiden clutched her shawl against her chest, her heart pounding, her eyes fixed on the dark horizon where the sound drew nearer. The betrayer, who had stepped from the shadows only hours before, lingered close but not too close, his face marked by guilt and determination. The warrior turned to the maiden, his voice low and steady. "When the time comes, you must be ready. What they want cannot fall into their hands." Her lips parted as if to protest, but she saw the firmness in his eyes, the resolve that would not bend. She only nodded, her breath trembling. The riders appeared at last, black shapes against the pale rim of dawn. They came in numbers, as the stranger had warned, their horses kicking up dust, their voices carrying through the valley. The warrior gripped his blade tighter, his body still waiting. He was one man, yet he carried the strength of storms, the silence of mountains, the fire of the land itself. The maiden looked to him and felt her fear settle into something deeper trust. She remembered the storm years ago, the night he had carried her through death's grasp. She remembered his arms around her, the warmth of his breath when the snow would have frozen her heart. And she remembered that she had sworn to find him again. Now here they were, facing a storm of men instead of snow, but the weight was the same. The riders surrounded the camp, their leader stepping forward, his voice sharp. "Give us the map, girl, and this will end without blood." The maiden straightened, her voice breaking but brave. "It does not belong to you. It never did." The man sneered. "All land can be taken. All promises can be broken." Before she could answer, the warrior stepped between them. His presence a wall no words could cross. His voice was low, but it carried across the valley like thunder. "This land does not bend to greed, or to those who carry its truth." The men shifted uneasily, their hands tightening on weapons. They had expected fear, not defiance. The leader's face twisted with anger. "Then you will die for it." The moment shattered like glass. Blades flashed, horses reared, the clash of voices rose. The warrior moved with the power of wind and fire, each strike sure and swift. He fought not for himself but for her, for the promise she carried, for the land beneath their feet. The maiden watched, her heart torn between terror and awe, her hands gripping the shawl as though it might hold her together. The betrayer, too, moved into the fight. Guilt seemed to burn away as he struck against those he had once aided. His face was grim, his movements desperate, as though each blow might erase the stain of his past. The battle raged as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the valley in gold. Dust rose around them, cries filled the air, and the world became a storm of steel and fire. The maiden's ears rang with the noise, her body frozen between fear and courage. She remembered her father's words, his final charge to her, the promise he had placed in her hands. Knew then that this was not only about survival, it was about honor, about keeping alive what others would destroy. At last the dust began to settle. The riders, broken and beaten, fled into the distance, their cries fading as the prairie swallowed them. The warrior stood tall, his chest rising with heavy breaths, his blade streaked but unbroken. The betrayer leaned heavily against a stone, his face pale, his body worn from the fight. The maiden rushed forward, her eyes shining with tears, her heart pounding with both relief and sorrow. She looked to the warrior first, her voice shaking. "You've saved me again." His gaze softened, though his face remained steady. "The storm passed, but it will return. What you carry will always draw shadows." She turned to the betrayer, who lowered his head, shame heavy in his eyes. "I cannot undo what I did," he said hoarsely, "but I gave you what warning I could. Perhaps it was not enough, but it was what I had left to give." The maiden's heart ached as she looked at him. Betrayal could not be erased, but she saw the truth in his eyes. He had tried to make right what had gone wrong. She placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Then let the land judge you. If it is enough, it will forgive." The warrior stood in silence, watching. He knew trust could not return easily, yet he also knew the land carried balance, and sometimes even broken branches could bear new growth. As the sun rose higher, the three of them sat by the stream, the fight behind them, but the journey ahead still uncertain. The maiden unwrapped the shawl and revealed the map she had carried so long. It was not ink and parchment as men might expect, but carved lines on aged hide, faded but still alive with meaning. Rivers, valleys, mountains, all marked with care, pointing not to gold, but to a hidden valley where water flowed eternal and life flourished in secret. "This is what they want," she said softly, her voice trembling. "A place untouched, where life still holds its purity. My father swore it would remain safe, and he passed that oath to me. I feared I could not keep it, but now I know it was never mine to keep alone." The warrior studied the map, his eyes tracing the lines with quiet understanding. A land such as this cannot be claimed by greed. It must remain hidden, guarded by those who understand its worth. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Then I will guard it, with my life if need be." The warrior placed his hand gently over hers, steady and sure. "You will not guard it alone." The words settled deep in her heart, stronger than any vow. For years she had carried the burden alone, weighed down by fear and doubt. Now, at last, she felt the strength of another beside her, a strength that would not falter. The betrayer lifted his head, his face marked with weariness and shame. "If you will allow it, I too will guard it. Let my final act be one of honor, not betrayal." The maiden hesitated, but the warrior gave a single nod. "The land may yet forgive you." And so it was decided. Together they would keep the promise, guarding not only the map but the truth it carried. The hunters would return, as shadows always do, but they would be ready. The land itself seemed to breathe with them, carrying their vow into the wind. As the day stretched on, the maiden sat quietly by the stream, watching the water flow steady and eternal. She thought of the storm years ago, the night when death had nearly claimed her, and of the arms that had carried her through it. She thought of the warrior beside her now, his presence as sure as the mountains. She thought of her father, his voice still alive in her heart, urging her to keep the promise. In that moment, she understood the meaning of it all. The blizzard had not been only a trial of snow and wind, but a path that had bound her life to his. The map was not only a burden, but a thread tying past to future, people to land, promises to hearts. The warrior looked at her, his eyes steady, his voice quiet. "The storm gave us to each other once, now the land gives us to its keeping. We cannot choose the paths we are given, but we can choose how we walk them." She met his gaze, her heart full. Then we walked together. The winds stirred the grass, carrying their words into the vast expanse of prairie, into the mountains and rivers, into the heart of the land itself. The storm had passed, but its memory remained, shaping them, binding them, guiding them toward the life that lay ahead. And so the story of the girl from the blizzard and the Apache warrior came to rest, not in endings, but in beginnings. They had faced betrayal, fought through fire, carried promises heavier than gold, and found in one another the strength to endure. The land remained their witness, silent and eternal, holding their vow within its breath. The prairie stretched wide before them, endless and unbroken, waiting for their steps. And as they moved forward, side by side, the shadows of the past fell behind, and the promise of tomorrow rose like the sun across the open sky.